Hi, I'm James McGuire, editor of Datamation, and our topic today is software-defined networking. We'll talk about key trends in the SDN sector with four experts, including Jude Chao, managing editor of Enterprise Networking Planet. Hello to you, Jude.
Hello, James.
So are you in sunny San Diego? Where exactly are you, Jude?
I am. I'm in Oceanside. It's a little bit north of San Diego proper, but right on the coast.
Okay. Also with us is Sean Michael Kerner, senior editor at InternetNews. Hello to you, Sean.
Hello, and hello to everybody in Google Hangout land.
And I know you are our honorary Canadian on the panel, which every panel should have a Canadian on it.
Yes, but you know, in the spirit of privacy, it was Privacy Day last week. I will say I'm in an undisclosed location.
Also with us is Art Cole, software-defined networking specialist and writer, also contributor to Enterprise Networking Planet. Hey, Art, hello to you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And where are you located, Art?
I am in Fredericksburg, just south of Washington, D.C.
Aha, okay. And also with us is Jeff Burt, senior editor at eWeek. Hello, Jeff.
James, how are you?
Good. I know you have covered technology since the 90s. Is that right about that?
2000.
This is year 2000. Okay, that seems like you've seen some serious changes.
It just feels like the 90s.
So the software-defined networking, I guess the question is, what is the state of the market these days? I mean, QuinStreet just put out a survey about adoption trends and key trends. What is really going on with the software-defined network? Is it really vaporware? Is it really here, or is it hugely adopted? Jude, what's your sense of that? How real is the SDN market?
My sense is that it's, at this point, I think it's safe to say that it's not vaporware. The market is absolutely growing and maturing, especially because the technology is now proving itself in production deployments, although at this stage mostly at telcos and the large cloud companies like Facebook, who are making use of it in related technologies. With that being said, it seems that the larger conversation isn't just around software-based networking SDN, but around other kind of virtualization as well. So you still have VLANs, which are still popular, and NFV, Network Functions Virtualization, is another option organizations have now that's gaining traction as well. But it just appears to be that the larger conversation really is virtualization to provide a flexibility that legacy physically based infrastructure has not been able to.
Interesting from the QuinStreet survey, it asked respondents, and the survey said over the next 2 to 3 years, 46% of respondents will be using it or planning to deploy it as a solution, which says to me that there's some momentum going on. What's your take? Are you seeing some serious adoption in the SDN market?
Well, I was surprised by those numbers when I read them in the survey. They seemed high to me, and I didn't look in the real breakdowns, but it seems to me like 90% of the 47% figure or whatever it was would be people who are thinking of deploying, and the other 10% are people who have deployed. I don't think there's a whole lot of field experience out there, and what is out there is probably in fairly limited scale. Nobody has really pushed this technology to its limits, not yet. Certainly within the coming year and within the next 2 years, you're most definitely going to see that. But the experience right now is, from my understanding, largely relegated to the lab and the test bed, and only in the past few months have we started to see real production environments, getting spun up.
Sean, real production environments, is SDN really out there? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like Art, I was a little bit surprised by the finding, but reminds me a lot, because I know you asked Jeff how long he's been writing, and I remember in those early 2000 days when I was writing too, we were writing about voice over IP, and we had some early studies. Oh yeah, 10%, 20%. Nobody does voice over IP studies today because everybody is using it.
Right.
And it's the same kind of direction, I think, with SDN. It's a feature. Incrementally over time, more people will use it. I think there's some challenges with definition, which is kind of funny because it's called software-defined networking.
Right, but it may not be defined itself.
Yeah, it's somewhat ambiguous, but that's a wonderful term. So quantifying that specific number of people and how they're using that is always challenging. And then where the real deployments are specifically, my personal opinion, cloud, because most cloud users will use some sort of software-defined networking piece, whether it's in the public cloud, in a hybrid, or even private, though not necessarily, but usually. And then any type, and this is very early, and this is where I think some of the futures are, is in containers, because container networking is by and large software-defined as well.
Right. I mean, you think about, SDN is really a subsector of virtualization as a whole, and obviously, is there an IT center or a data center that is not going to be virtualized, going forward? So it seems like for SDN, it's a question of when, not if. Jeff, your take on that? Is SDN really happening these days?
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with what's been said. I mean, it's certainly happening in the larger clouds, the larger companies. But I also think what you're seeing now is you're seeing probably a lot of testing going on. And what you'll probably see, I'm guessing, towards the end of this year into next year, is you're going to start seeing more ramping of production. So I do it's got a lot of benefits that I think people are just going to want to take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. What about the real-world advantages versus the costs? I mean, considering that adoption has not been, overwhelming thus far, what is the balance there? Costs versus advantages. What is going to drive people to this?
Well, the cost factor, in my opinion, is sort of the appetizer before the meal. The real advantage in all of this is the programmability. Once you can program networks through software, you open up a whole new world of possibilities as to what, not only what can be done in the data environment, but what the data environment itself is and how it relates to business models and business processes. And I think we're looking at a real top to bottom change as to not just in digital terms or in technology terms, but in business terms, how companies are going to be run and how revenue streams are going to be defined and who's going to own those revenue streams. All of this is sort of thrown up in the air once you have lifted the whole data stack off of hardware firmly, not the way it's been done.
How does that revenue stream picture impact the adoption of SDN?
As far as how it's paid for, how do you?
Yeah, or what? I mean, you draw a comparison there. I'm not sure the connection between those two things.
Well, it's that today you make product, you sell product, and you get the money for it. With SDN, you can make product, reshape the product, create new business models, new business markets, and quickly and efficiently target them and access those markets and derive revenue streams from them. And it's not always going to be clear who owns the revenue stream. As if we want to talk about, say, automobiles, the person who makes the car is going to be making the money. The person who makes the software upgrades that are going to be going into the cars, the person who provides the infrastructure to enable these changes, and concepts like ownership and place and position are breaking down. Yeah. It's and I'm not saying that this is all a good thing or all a bad thing. It's just going to be a different thing that we're going to have to work out how it's all going to work to people's benefit.
Sure. Jude, your take on benefits and costs, and what is really driving companies to SDN, if anything?
I think that Art gave a really great picture of what seems to be the transformative, the real deep down benefits of SDN. I think based on the research from the Quinn Street Survey and other studies that I've seen as well, cost savings really is the key motivator at this point for organizations to begin exploring SDN. The interesting thing is that cost savings is often the top-cited challenge as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it speaks to sort of the complexity of the idea of SDN, all the things that it can change within your data environment, within your business, and the way that things will be run. It seems to me that one of the key challenges is going to be, how will we use this as an organization? There are so many directions you can go in, and as Art demonstrated, it's such a broad, transformative technology. It's not quite the same thing as just upgrading a piece of equipment. Mm-hmm. It's really a completely different paradigm. It's a different way of thinking. So the big challenge to organizations is, how do we shift the way that we do things, and how do we focus, how do we harness this for our own goals? I think it will take some time for most enterprises to get to a point where they have a handle on what they can do with it and how it can best serve them.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned that from the survey, the benefits of SDN. The number one was cost savings, but then followed behind that at 47, 46, and 45% are improved network performance, increased productivity, similar idea, and improved security. Interesting in terms of the top challenge, the survey found that 42% was integration and interoperability. In other words, how are we going to fit this concept with our good old-fashioned hardware network? Sean, your take of the costs and the benefits and the costs of SDN?
Yeah, I'll be the contrarian and tell you SDN is free.
Oh, good. Open source. Okay, good.
Free, open source. So I'm sitting on a Linux machine right now. I've got Open vSwitch. Free. I didn't pay for it. My network is channeled, and I'm using a Juniper Contrail controller, also free.
Well, but what about the personnel that companies need to hire to maintain that free?
You hire smart people. Not that I'm for hire. You hire smart people, you don't need to pay anybody.
Gotcha. Well, that does entail hiring smart people, though.
Yeah.
Hiring people.
You always need smart people. No, what it does is it takes a lot of cost out, which is why big companies like Cisco and Juniper are worried and trying to maneuver technology so they can still get a piece. Mm-hmm. In the hardware-defined networking market, I would have needed a top-of-rack switch and physical switches to route my traffic and do everything I need to do. Each one of those items has a cost. A physical CapEx cost for the hardware, and then I would have been paying OpEx on subscription and license support for the software. When you're talking SDN, we're typically paying, it's either free, or if you want support, you're paying subscription support. So it pulls out that OpEx, that initial CapEx outlay altogether, and then changes the entire revenue stream to a recurring subscription-based model, which some people like, some people don't, but it's just a different way of accounting for it. But for smaller organizations, SDN offers an opportunity to do things like, for me, in my small little bunker here, I could do things that 3 years ago would have cost me $50,000 to do, I can do for zero now. So it's kind of interesting.
Given that there's the personnel to support that, yeah. Jeff, your take, the cost and benefits of SDN. What is driving companies and people to software-defined networking?
Well, I thought Art had it right. I mean, initially it's going to be cost savings. I mean, it just is. And the other stuff is the other things that people can do with it are going to come later, and that's what they're really going to grab onto. I also think that one of the things to keep in mind, too, is that many of these companies have already dealt with server virtualization, storage virtualization. So having a hardware-based network is really kind of blocks them from being able to really do what they want to do with this virtualization technology. So they need that third leg to also virtualize.
When you say the third leg, just
network.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can't take advantage of full server virtualization and full storage virtualization and have hardware-based networking if you want to get the full benefits out of it. I mean, you've got a lot of companies now, a lot of vendors talking about software-defined data centers, and to have that, you've got to have this sort of a technology.
I mean, I think that if there is a truly software-defined data center out there, I don't know of it yet. I don't think a fully software-defined data center actually really exists all the way. I think it's still kind of an idea that we might be moving towards.
Definitely.
What about vendors and related technologies? Jude, you mentioned NFV. I mean, who are the winners and losers in this process? There's the legacy players. There's startups. Who's going to win as SDN gets adopted? Jude, your sense of that?
I don't think it's possible to pick who can win at this point so early in the game, but for NFV, definitely VMware is a big, big player. And as far as the SDN, this kind of concept, although Cisco calls it by a different name, I would say that Cisco, because of their massive footprint within the enterprise already, is going to be a leader almost by default, just by already being there.
Right. People trust that name.
Exactly, and they already have all their stuff. So it's less intimidating, I think, as a transition.
All right, who do you see as the big winners and losers in as companies move to the SDN?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of talk about the legacy hardware. People are fretting over this, but maybe long term. But in the short term, you have to understand that most enterprises have all that legacy hardware in-house, and they still want to leverage that and derive value from that. So, and hardly anybody has the expertise in-house to, simply set this up on a commodity basis and lay the software on top and make it go. Facebook can do it and Google can do it, but
right.
Even Ford Motor Company probably can do it. Smaller and medium-sized organizations probably don't have that knowledge. So the opportunity for the legacy vendors and their channel supporters is to sort of guide the enterprise through this process. Whether or not that ultimately turns to their benefit, to the vendor's benefit, is still up in the air. It would be almost it would be their game to lose if they ended up blowing it. But I don't think it's accurate to really talk about who's winning and who's losing. I think everybody here can make a go of this in one way or the other. You might not have Cisco anymore as top dog. They could be a lot more fracturization of the market after all is said and done. But it's all speculative at this point.
Interesting. You mentioned Facebook, and from the survey I talked about who the adopters are, and the biggest chunk, the 19% of adopters, are tech companies, followed by 12% of telecom and internet companies. So it's no surprise companies already involved with networking are deep into SDN. Jeff, your take on who's going to emerge as a leader in this world? Who's going to win in the SDN world?
Well, I tend to agree right now. So it's a little early. Again, we got a situation where you have the bulk of enterprises are probably still doing testing and all that. I think Jude made a good point. Companies like Cisco, they've got a huge install base, and going over to an SDN network is not a rip and replace sort of thing. It's a migration sort of thing. So I think, and certainly you see that in the Quinn Street survey where Cisco's got, I think, 45% of the people surveyed, so that they're running Cisco SDN right now. So yeah, I don't think you can pick winners or losers. I think what you've got now is you've still got a situation where the market is still developing, and so what you're going to see is people like Cisco who they're able to sell into their customer base already. You've got other companies, smaller companies, say Big Switch and Plexi, who are making, who are raising a lot of money still. So there's still a lot of play that needs to be done out there before you can start saying who's going to win and lose.
It's about funding of startups, among other things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You had three startups just in January that got over, they got tens of millions in venture capital funds. So there's a lot of backing of them. You've got Cisco and everybody else is putting a lot of money into this, into their portfolios. So it still needs to shake out some.
Sean, your take? Who's going to emerge victorious? And
My take.
Somewhere in there, Openstack could be a factor in all this?
No. Openstack is not going to be a factor, unfortunately. It'll be a platform that people use, but that'll be interesting on the NFV side. From my perspective, I know we're talking that it's a little bit immature for some, but you have to remember that it was now 4 years ago. So that's a good amount of time that VMware bought Nicira for over $1 billion. Mm-hmm. So 4 years ago, the VMware people and their accountants did the math to figure that it was worth at least $1 billion. I would say and argue strongly that that Nicira asset is now worth significantly more than $1 billion. Their run rate is significantly more than that in any given year. So if we assume that NSX is SDN, then NSX is doing quite well. But that's pure play. The other thing that we have to consider is the first generation of SDN, which was very complicated for people to figure out, including me. It was all OpenFlow based, and OpenFlow was very much tied to the hardware, which is kind of stupid when you think about it. You're talking about something that's software-defined networking, but you need a physical switch to support it. So if the physical switch didn't support OpenFlow, you have no SDN. The modern approaches to SDN, the ones that I happen to like, the ones that VMware is using now and Cisco is using and a few others, are VXLAN based. Now VXLAN is an IEEE standard. It allows for encapsulation of a layer 2 network over layer 3. That's basically a wider domain over a shorter domain. You can do VXLAN overlay on existing hardware as an encapsulation. Now that's kind of a lot of funky words there, but basically means I could take lower level protocols, bunch them together, and run it over. So the magic is, if you have, let's say, NSX or some kind of VXLAN enabled SDN, it's a logical deployment on top of your existing infrastructure as an overlay. That's still complicated. You still need an orchestration system, maybe a controller, maybe policies and security and everything else, but it's a little bit different. Now these are newer concepts, but the idea of overlaying on top is a standard networking idea. I brought props today. This is my standard Cat 5.
Are you going to explain the overlay idea with SDN overlaying with over a hardware infrastructure?
When I first got this cable, I ran low-level protocols, Novell NetWare and crap like that. Wow. That's layer 1. You connect, and then you have Ethernet, and then you have TCP. You have TCP/IP rather. Ethernet. Then you have TCP/IP. Then you have other higher-level services. You can have VLAN, VXLAN, etc., etc. So in networking, you only have two things that you ever really have to think about, in my opinion: abstraction and encapsulation. So what we're doing with SDN now is on one layer, vendors are abstracting it. They're saying instead of a switch, a physical piece of hardware, we're abstracting it as a software construct. And on the wire, it's now encapsulation as what had been lower level protocols into something that's a bundle, so that way we can understand software in different ways.
Amazing. Jude, your take on winners and losers? Are the legacy players really upset about this, or they're going to stay ahead?
I think it's just too early to tell, but I don't think that the legacy players necessarily are feeling that much heat, because the fact that they are already in there is a big advantage. Yeah,
good deal. So looking ahead to the future, say 3 to 5, even 7 years from now, where does all this go? I mean, if SDN is in its infancy in the enterprise now, will it be an established technology, and how does the cloud play into all this? Jeff, what's your take on the future of SDN?
Well, I think it's definitely going to grow. It certainly has got the momentum behind it. It's got people interested in it. 3 to 5 years down the road, I think you're going to see it's pretty well established in certainly a lot of larger companies. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty well established, and people are going to be using it.
Yeah. Art, you agree with that, or will this not really take off like people think it might?
Well, I think it will take off, but I think the longer-term prospects, at least for the enterprise, are a little bit iffy, because if you consider that more and more of the workload is being ported over to the cloud, then the enterprise infrastructure is going to shrink. Right. And if the predictions are right, it's going to shrink and become more modular. So now you're going to have these, integrated compute server networking boxes, lined up in a fraction of the space that you have the data center, and they're all going to be connected, via the interconnect, an InfiniBand or PCI-based fabric. So how or whether, what we call SDN is going to apply to that, and how it's going to manage just that infrastructure or that enterprise infrastructure is kind of a fuzzy area. I really can't see too far into that future.
The cloud, the movement to the cloud could really play a role in that.
Yeah. So then the big cloud providers, sure, they're going to want SDN, but on the enterprise side, with this streamlined, limited infrastructure, they might not need it quite so bad.
Jude, agree, disagree? Where are we going with SDN?
I think Art brought up a very, very good point. So as we kind of look at the migration of a lot of workloads to the cloud and to the public cloud in general, maybe a lot of enterprises will decide that it isn't worth it to start thinking about SDN. Maybe it's more worth it to move those workloads to a cloud provider who has SDN. So
Right.
in some form, it will be there. I don't see it going away. I will be very curious to see how it shakes out as far as actually trickling down into the enterprise and what kind of organizations decide they really need the technology versus those that will outsource for the benefit.
Right. There certainly would be a certain amount of outsourcing going on. Sean, your take, the future of SDN, looking 3 to 5 years down the road?
3 to 5 years. Well, I agree with
or longer.
Yeah, or longer. I'm just happy the next 3 to 5 weeks. There seems to be
And by the way, no one makes predictions in technology for 5 years out. No one even ever wants to. But I throw the question out there anyway.
No one makes accurate predictions. You can make predictions all you want.
Yeah,
but,
right.
Yeah.
We're all going to be eating Soylent Green 5 years from now. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult in the enterprise. I think it's a non-starter, unfortunately, for half a dozen reasons. For better or for worse, whenever I walk
what are a couple of those reasons in your view?
Just the basic reason that enterprises are slow and very slow movers. I still walk in, and all of us probably do. You walk into some organization or whatever, and then you look at the switch, and you realize these guys are using fast Ethernet. They're not using gig Ethernet even. People still have old machines. Like, I still write about people who run Windows XP, which is, hackers' paradise. So
Wow.
people have old stuff. So enterprises transition very, very slowly. And the truth is, and this is the great thing about this study that we published, for an enterprise of less than 5,000 persons, a VLAN will probably do just about everything they need. A VLAN has a logical limit of 4,884 tags. That means if you sliced up your network into 4,084 specific segments, you're still good. It's scalability beyond that. So for a mid-size organization, I'm going to call 5,000 mid-size, your VLAN is gonna cut it, and then you could abstract VLANs out from there. So it's not really necessary to do the types of things enterprises need. Now, when we talk about private cloud, yeah, absolutely, that's just a feature. SDN is a feature. When it comes to container networking and any kind of DevOps deployment, SDN is a must-have. So as organizations move to these next generation models, whether it's private cloud or containers or even just virtualization, just every, this is why NSX is so successful, every vSphere deployment probably sold this year is going to have an NSX component to it. So as these companies go to renew their licenses, the friendly VMware salespeople are absolutely asking them about NSX. So just by growth, it'll go that way. But native SDN in the enterprise, no. So 3 to 5 years from now, I think we'll see it everywhere in vSphere. I think we'll see it everywhere in the cloud, everywhere in containers. Beyond that, I don't think we're going to be talking about it because I think it's just going to be a feature, just like Voice over IP is a feature in every enterprise network today.
It'll be part of a larger virtualization of the infrastructure.
Just a feature.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, I thank the four of you for your expertise. There's a lot of good stuff. I will send you the link. We can all tweet about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.